What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Patrick, aka Addicted to Combat, back for another week of fights. We've got UFC Vegas 63 on deck with Calvin Kattar taking on Arnold Allen, a potential 5-round war at featherweight. And I love whenever Calvin Kattar comes to headline these fight nights because it's always guaranteed entertainment. But the money lines are a little weird this week, and we've lost a lot of fights. We're down to 10 fights, one of those being added earlier today, so might be a lot of passes betting-wise, but still going to be an entertaining card. There's a lot of untrustworthy fighters in this one as well that we have to learn a little bit more about. But hit that like, hit that subscribe, and besides subscribing, if you check out BetUS, a partner of Addicted to Combat, that helps out the channel as well. The link is in the description and in my YouTube bio. They have competitive lines on all sports, including mixed martial arts, and I notice a lot of mispriced and unupdated fight lines for mixed martial arts that you could really take advantage of. If you make that deposit, you get a deposit bonus of 125% for the sportsbook if you use my link in the description. So without further ado, let's get into these 10 fights. Okay, kicking off the card, we have Cody Durden taking on short notice replacement Carlos Mota. Mota is on about a week's notice here, filling in for Clayton Rodriguez. And Cody Durden is a guy who really needs to right the ship in his UFC career. He's been mixed with, losses, draws, close decision victories, and now he finally righted the ship recently with a 1-round knockout over JP Buys. JP Buys not the best, but at least Cody Durden did make a statement with a vicious round 1 KO like a minute into the fight. So a wrestle boxer, power in his hands, as I've mentioned. He does have a good ability to get the takedowns. Not the best ability at holding his opponents down, but he does have a good back take and at least decent cardio for the weight class. He's never been KO'd, but he has been hurt. He was clubbed and subbed, was Cody Durden, back in March in London by Muhammad Mokaev. Flying kneed him, took his neck. It was game over in about 60 seconds. So Cody Durden trying to shake off that loss. He's doing a good job of it, but Carlos Mota is a savage on short notice. He's the current LFA flyweight champion. He did, in his only loss, Carlos Mota is 8-1. He has that one loss, which was a 5th-round TKO loss to Charles Johnson, who was in the UFC. Carlos Mota is a guy who is 5'6", a 70-inch reach, and only 27 years old for the Brazilian. Cody Durden just a couple years older at 31, lacking a couple inches of reach, but Cody Durden is 5'7". They're going to size up very well in this fight. Carlos Mota, man, he is a very powerful guy for the weight class. 4 knockouts. I think a couple of those were to body strikes that set up the knockout sequence. As I mentioned, he is 4-0 in decisions, no submission wins. Carlos Mota, I did a breakdown of his fight against Rizvan Abuev at his last LFA appearance in August. It was a UFC off week, so I broke down the fight, picked Carlos Mota to win, bet him to win, and he cashed with a very easy left-handed one-hitter quitter over Rizvan Abuev, who is a very good European talent at flyweight. So he prefers to strike, does Carlos Mota. He's got very technical striking, powerful striking, good cardio until the later parts of a fight, which I don't think are going to come into play in this 3-round fight, but the takedowns he'll take advantage of when they arise. It's not normally his go-to thing. He did have a couple takedowns over Charles Johnson. Not the best ability to hold opponents down, but he does have good jiu-jitsu enough to get the back takes, threaten for submissions, although he doesn't have any officially on his record. So I'd give the wrestling and even the submission offense to Cody Durden, but I'd give the cardio, I'd give the technical striking, and even the power I'd give to Carlos Mota. So it's going to be an interesting fight. I'm going to pick Mota to win this fight inside the distance. I think he should be the favorite here, but on the short notice, not that much of a favorite. I would bet this up to like -150 for Mota. But he's already swung to like a -185 favorite, even on short notice. So I don't quite know if I'm going to get there. Maybe the props of like a Mota inside the distance, or maybe even scorecards equal no action on short notice. I would pick Mota to win. Cody Durden's certainly a live dog here. He can overwhelm his opponents with the wrestling and the forward pressure. So out of full camp, preparing for another, dangerous striker in Rodriguez. Cody Durden's certainly a live underdog at these odds. But we'll see where the line goes. I'm going to pick Carlos Mota to win this fight, though. Okay, up next, an intriguing middleweight fight between Phil Hawes and Roman Dolidze. Two guys I'm not too keen on backing betting-wise historically. We've got Phil Hawes, who is coming off of a destruction over Duran Win. Almost got him out of there in round 1. Finished the job in round 2 savagely. It is Duran Win at the end of the day. Phil Hawes is the -155 favorite in this spot, moving towards like -170. Money's coming in on him. Roman Dolidze, the +135 underdog for the Georgian fighter, who is 10-1. His one loss came to Trevin Giles in a very close fight. This guy in a very close parallel universe could be undefeated right now. Although I'm not really arguing that Trevin Giles lost. He did lose it based on his poor fight IQ. We'll get into that, a reason why I don't like betting Roman Dolidze, but the guy is strong. The more physically imposing guy at 34 years old, 6'2". He is primarily a southpaw. He can change stances, though. 76-inch reach for the grappling world champion, Roman Dolidze. Phil Hawes, 33 years old. Age is comparable. Phil Hawes is somewhere between 5'11 and 6 foot tall with a 77.5-inch reach. So reach about the same, but just a bigger stature for Dolidze here. Phil Hawes is 12-3 as a professional, 4-1 in the UFC. Not the best level of competition for Phil Hawes, to be honest with you. Some of those wins are aging well, like the one against Jacob Malkoun, I guess. He knocked him out in 18 seconds, flash KO at the end of 2020. But the issues for Phil Hawes, he's got cardio issues. He really does. Towards the end of, he's got that explosive energy early. If he doesn't get his opponents out of there early with the strikes, or the wrestling can kind of wear him down. By round 3, he'll have a performance like against Imavov, where he looks very slow and pretty much needed to rely on that wrestling to bail him out of some bad situations when he was tired. Probably off the table against Dolidze, who's super physically strong and a grappler himself. And Roman Dolidze is explosive as well, kind of out of nowhere. He conserves energy at this weight class, can lull his opponents into a very slow, low output rhythm of counter-striking, slipping punches, and then, he can explode with like that big left high kick he knocked out Ibragimov with a couple years ago. Most recently, he's exploded into a lot of clinch work where he's strong and opponents can't shake him off of them. And Kyle Daukaus, got kneed in the jaw and knocked out very early in round 1. Very impressive. Probably the best victory for Dolidze so far. So, not the fastest guy, but not the slowest either for Dolidze. I like his physically imposing, structure here in the clinch. I think he can wear out Phil Hawes early in this fight. And really slow down Phil Hawes and just be the man surviving and more active. He's not afraid to make a fight very boring like he did against Laureano Staropoli, I think like a year and a half ago. He just basically got that rear waist body lock against the fence, controlled him as the stronger man, drug him down to the ground a couple of times, and won a very clear, boring decision. He could do that in the early going against Phil Hawes, and now we're seeing Dolidze with this ability to get those clinched knees. He looked for some of those knees against Staropoli. They just didn't land on their mark, but when they do, they're devastating, as we saw with the Kyle Daukaus fight. It's the fight IQ for Roman Dolidze that just is a struggle to me. We're seeing less of it in his recent fights, but dropping for heel hooks lost him that fight against Trevin Giles. Against John Allen, luckily he was able to win that fight. But again, dropping for heel hooks against John Allen, not the best look in that fight either. The jab and the striking combination and being accurate is going to be key early for Phil Hawes. But again, Dolidze is a guy who's got extraordinary durability. We've only seen him in trouble one time against Giles. That straight right cross in round 3 wobbled Dolidze a bit. He recovered quickly though, so Phil Hawes doesn't have that kind of durability. He got knocked out 2 fights ago against Chris Curtis in round 1. He's been knocked out in the past. So you got to give the size, probably the grappling and the clinch, cardio, durability. For Roman Dolidze, I got to give the striking and the output and activity to Phil Hawes. And, Phil Hawes has that takedown defense as the D1 collegiate wrestler, although it hasn't been tested all that much. Give me Roman Dolidze to win a decision here. I think strategically he can do it. Not something I intend to bet on just because Dolidze is pretty dumb, but I'm going to take his cardio in the long run to win a very boring decision here and potentially get the better strikes, especially at the end of the fight in round 3. Up next at middleweight, we've got Joseph Holmes taking on Junyun Park, and there's a clash in experience and a clash in styles in this fight. We've got Junyun Park, the veteran of 6 UFC fights so far, going 4-2 within those results, coming off of a win. Very close win over Eric Anders. Joseph Holmes has only been in the UFC twice now, going 1-1. He is coming off of that loss to Jamie Pickett in a short notice debut and the win over Alan Amedovski by club and sub in 1 minute's time. So as such, Junyun Park is the minus 225 all the way up to a minus 245 favorite he's approaching. Joseph Holmes about a plus 190 underdog right now. Joseph Holmes, the younger man at 27, the taller man at 6'4", and the much longer reach of a man at 80-inch reach. Junyun Park giving up 7 inches of reach, about 5 or 6 inches in reach, and he is 31 years old, so still in the prime. a lot of physical advantages for Joseph Holmes, kind of like Jamie Pickett has a lot of physical advantages over people at middleweight. Will he use those to his advantage here? I would give the, of course, the youth to Joseph Holmes. I'll give the pure jiu-jitsu to Joseph Holmes, who has 6 submissions on his record, including that club and sub most recently over Amedovski in 64 seconds. And a win over the Contender Series by submission as well, if memory serves me right. He just doesn't let his hands go enough for me, and he lost that decision to Jamie Pickett. Had some decent moments on the feet, also, had some strikes against him, but he gave up a couple takedowns that were key, and time, control on the clinch, which was key as well. He lost those battles. And Julian Park can employ these types of game plans. Julian Park has very good boxing on the inside. Not the highest output guy either is Julian Park. He can be hesitant at times, but he still has a lot of output in general. And he had that awesome performance a couple years ago that I'm always going to remember him by over John Phillips, where he grounded John Phillips, controlled him for like 13 minutes out of 15, and landed, I believe, like 260 total strikes out of like 400 attempted. It was an amazing, dominant performance with a guy he could take to the ground. So at his best, that was a dominant performance. Something else that impressed me was he went toe-to-toe with Gregory Rodriguez last year, like exactly a year ago in October, I believe. Almost had Gregory Rodriguez out of there before, kind of gassing himself out. His defense fell victim to RoboCop's power, and he got himself knocked out. So, at the best, he's performing with guys like Eric Anders and RoboCop Rodriguez. So I do like him in this fight. I think he's deservedly the favorite. Is there a lot of extra value once we get to this point? Maybe not. Maybe the decision prop is a way to look at this fight. But I think he does warrant being the favorite here. Again, Joseph Holmes, all the physical advantages, maybe a better ceiling than he seems to have so far. And I do give him the BJJ advantage purely, but Julian Park is hard to get to the ground that way. He has been subbed twice, once by Fluffy Hernandez, once by Shavkat Rakhmonov. Both of those were a while back. So we're looking at 2016 for the Rakhmonov loss. We're looking at... what are we looking? 2018 or 19 for the Fluffy Hernandez lost by sub. Since then, he's been pretty good, able to ground guys like Tafan and Chukwi and do pretty well with that game plan. So give me Julian Park. I think he can win the inside distance, boxing exchanges once he gets inside that reach of Joseph Holmes. And I think he can eventually take Joseph Holmes down and control him. So Julian Park, pretty confidently, is my pick here. Up next at featherweight, one of the youngest fighters on the roster, Chase Hooper, who is now turned 23 years old, is fighting Steve Garcia, who is 30 years old. And Chase Hooper is a sizable favorite in this fight. We're looking at minus 240 to minus 250 and climbing for Chase Hooper. Coming off of a very impressive win by strikes, TKO stoppage due to ground and pound. Steve Garcia coming off of a KO loss viciously early in round 1 back in June on that Singapore card, UFC 275 by a debutant in Mahashate. So Steve Garcia, not the best guy, not the most talented guy. He's, had a 7-fight stint in Bellator with mixed success. He's got a 12-5 record overall. He does like to stand and bang. He does have power in his hands, and a decent, well-rounded fundamental skill of all parts of MMA. But he can get exposed in the grappling at the high level. Luis Pena is going to be the fight that comes to mind for this one because Pena fought a very similar game plan to what Chase Hooper likes to do, which is use his BJJ black belt, be a backpack, sort of like a large white Aljamain Sterling, and, just rack up minutes and look for the choke. And as we saw in Chase Hooper's last fight, he looks a little bit more physically strong in the clinch. He looks like he can bully his opponents around there and hold his own. Looked more comfortable at striking distance against Felipe Colares. And then also was just able to, once again, use that game plan of getting his back, a very fast back take, hold him there, and move from that body triangle to top mount position, and eventually look for the choke or rain down strikes. And he ended up getting the TKO that way. So a very good win as an underdog for Chase Hooper. And it looks like he's kind of turned a leaf. Now, is that going to be enough for me to, he's got a clear game plan, a clear way to win this fight against Steve Garcia, but I've seen one instance of him really coming through as an underdog and performing well. It looks like things are bright for Chase Hooper more than we probably thought. Not enough for me to bet him at minus 250 or more over Steve Garcia, who's still dangerous, in this fight. So if it stays at striking range somehow, I think Steve Garcia should be favored in that aspect of MMA. But Chase Hooper, he finds a way to close the distance with those long southpaw weapons. He looks like he's going to be able to, grab kicks, clinch up and be strong there as the bigger man in this bout. So give me Chase Hooper to win this fight. I think he does get the job done inside the distance, probably by submission at some point, but not enough for me to bet on him at this point. I just want to watch and see how he improves. Okay, up next at heavyweight, a very fun fight I'm looking forward to between Andrei Arlovski, the former UFC heavyweight champion, one of my favorites of all time, taking on Marcos Rogerio de Lima. The Brazilian power puncher is the minus 210 favorite, even though he's coming off of a close decision loss to Blagoy Ivanov in May of this year. Arlovski is coming off of 4 wins in a row, all by decision, some of them very close, some of them more decisive, but either way, 43, he is the plus 180 underdog here. I've seen as high as plus 190 as well. The lines are still moving. So Arlovski, just some appreciation for this guy, 43 years old, was the heavyweight champion of the world like 18 years ago with that heel hook victory over Tim Sylvia. And, I got to say, this guy's boxing is looking very good. He has adapted his style to less of a submission threat, less of that full sambo, style, more of just a boxer with slick movement. He's running circles around some of these less talented, less of a high ceiling type of young heavyweights, just doing enough to win these decisions and, stay on his feet and stay all the way in or all the way out with his movement. But man, he's had 38 UFC fights at heavyweight, way more than any other UFC heavyweight in history. I think Frank Mir came close with like 27 or something. As of the active fighters, Derek Lewis is at 25 at heavyweight since his debut back in 2013. So, this guy is just blowing away all of the heavyweights. For a dangerous division as heavyweight, this guy kills it. So 43 years old, a 37 for De Lima. It's Andrei Arlovski with 2 inches of reach, 2 inches of height. Look, he probably didn't win that last fight against Jake Collier. Very close fight there. Arlovski with a lot of the cleaner punches in that fight, but he did get controlled and taken down, especially towards the end of that third round. So that can happen. And De Lima is a guy who's a very physically imposing heavyweight, a very fast, explosive starter with good power. In fact, all of his, his 4 knockouts and 1 submission in the UFC have all been in round 1. Just like a lot of his losses, he's had 5 submission losses in the UFC, has De Lima. Those have all been under 1.5 rounds as well. So most dangerous of getting taken out or getting the victory early. But De Lima can be physical as well. He took down Maurice Green, who was terrible back when he was in the UFC. But he controlled him for 14 minutes out of 15 minutes of that 3-round fight. So it can be done. I don't think Arlovski's going to succumb to that type of strategy, and I don't think Rogerio de Lima is going to feel the need to really bully him on the ground, but he might bully him in the clinch. Where I see this fight being most dangerous for Arlovski is very early, where de Lima can have that 1-punch knockout power, or very late in the fight when Arlovski himself is very tired, De Lima is very tired, and De Lima will just use his size and strength to press Arlovski against the cage in the clinch, do just enough clinch knees and things like that to stop the stalemate and the separation. But he was able to do that against Blagoy Ivanov last time, even getting that last 10-second takedown over Blagoy Ivanov in that fight. So the youth, the power, the explosivity, and just the physicality of De Lima, even though he's probably not the most trim heavyweight could be with a heavyweight cut, a 205er, he's still a big guy. So you got to give him credit where that's due. Obviously, Arlovski's got the better boxing and hand speed, better combinations, technical striking, minute winning ability, for the most part, the cardio, and just all of the experience in the world at heavyweight as I laid out. So Arlovski right now, he's 14-8 in decisions. I'm counting one of those decision, the no contest to Walt Harris as a loss in that one, just because it was due to, some sort of anabolic use. Who cares about that? Honestly, he still lost the fight to Arlovski. So 14-8 in decisions. He's just finding ways to win these ones. Like I said, he's on a 4-fight winning streak here, some of them closer than others. 5 of his, most recent 24 UFC fights have been split decisions. So getting Arlovski by split obviously is not a bad look here. I am going to take him to win this fight by decision. I think he's going to have the ability to, just not get chinned early in this fight, be all the way in, all the way out with the boxing. He's got clean combinations, pressures forward, can even stun his opponents to get their respect. And then at the end of the fight, if he can secure round 1, Arlovski, secure round 2 decisively, then round 3, maybe he does get held up against the cage and, controlled there for that round. 29-28 decision for Andrei Arlovski. At plus 190, I did put 1 unit on him to win this fight. It's a risky endeavor with a 43-year-old in Arlovski. I understand that. Some close decisions, like his most recent one, he probably didn't win, but Lima's, again, very dangerous early, very dangerous late, so give me Andre Arlovski to win this fight. Up next is a fight at middleweight between Josh Fremd and Tresean Gore, two guys looking for their first win in the UFC. Tresean Gore is currently 0-2 in the UFC, both fights happening this year. Josh Fremd most recently had his debut, I believe on short notice, to Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, which is a tough fight. He lost by a 3-round decision. Almost a feather in his cap. He didn't get submitted. He showed some good attributes. We'll get into the little that I know about both of these guys, even after watching pretty much all of their fights professionally. Josh Fremd, a -180 favorite. Tresean Gore, about a +155 underdog as it stands right now. Josh Fremd had 4 fights in the LFA. He went 3-1 in those 4 fights. 3 wins were all first-round knockouts. He does have power, but he does, kind of tend to be defensively lacking, in my opinion. Have that tall man defense at 6'4", pull his head back and his upper body back without keeping his hands up as a way to avoid punches. That'll catch him eventually, like it did against Gregory Rodriguez, who was his one loss in the LFA, a round-1 knockout in that fight as well. Tresean Gore was on The Ultimate Fighter. He did have a 3-1 amateur record, a 3-1 professional record before the show. Had to pull out of the show for injury and came back against the winner of the show, Bryan Battle, for like the undisputed Ultimate Fighter season finale earlier in February, and he lost that fight by a 3-round decision. Very hesitant to let his hands go as Tresean Gore. He does display very good power, though. Bryan Battle dealt with it. And, Tresean Gore showed that he was able to get, fundamentally sound enough to get some takedowns, strong enough to secure takedowns, and show some good takedown defense as well. So, very little about this guy's cardio when pushed to a frantic pace, and very little do I know about his durability. Now, in his second fight back in July in the UFC, he got knocked out by Cody Brundage in round 1. So, is Brundage that powerful? He seems to be. Or is Tresean Gore, just kind of have a glass chin? I'm not quite sure. He hasn't been tested that much with so few professional fights, only 5. So this is a spot where I would not be surprised if the underdog comes through with a big knockout, throws a big overhand right on Josh Fremd, catches him and knocks him out. He seems to have the power to be able to do that, and we've seen Fremd put out before by strikes. But I also wouldn't be surprised if Fremd was able to get an early knockout on Tresean Gore. I'm not even predicting that there's violence. This could be a very low-output fight, where Josh Fremd just wins minutes with his activity, and Tresean Gore just stands there and does very little. So I don't quite know. It's a very dangerous fight to bet on. I don't have a clear read on it. The over-unders are set at 1.5. I believe it's the only fight on this entire card set that way, with the under 1.5 at +155. That might be the way I'd be leading on this fight. It's just, fight doesn't go in general. Get the alternate round prop at like the under 2.5. Just based on the records, that's the way I would probably look for this one. I think this should be set more evenly lined, to be honest with you. But I will take Josh Fremd to get a victory here with 0 confidence whatsoever. Okay, very intriguing matchup at heavyweight up next between Jared Vanderaa and Waldo Cortes-Acosta. Vanderaa is the +190 underdog. As a veteran of 6 UFC fights, he's gone 1-5, riding a 4-fight losing streak currently. Waldo Cortes-Acosta, the -225 favorite, is coming off of a round 1 debut in the UFC, on the Dana White Contender Series over the summer. He is 7-0. His fight before the Dana White Contender Series was a 3rd-round knockout where he won the LFA Heavyweight Championship. And he's on a 3 knockout streak in 2022. All of those fights happened. He does have 2 knockout losses in boxing, although his durability looks okay in mixed martial arts because I've seen him take clean punches even when he's fatigued, and he seems to handle that okay. Jared Vanderaa, not the best power puncher we've seen. Vanderaa's biggest strength in this fight is probably his BJJ, his experience, and his cardio is okay. His defense falls down. These guys are both slow, plodding heavyweights. Although in the later parts of the fight, I've seen some zip on the punches of Acosta that I don't see from Vanderaa in the later parts of a fight. Along those lines, Vanderaa's last loss was a 3rd-round knockout over Chase Sherman. Chase Sherman's supposed to only have like 6 minutes of cardio, if that, and he was able to put a pace on Vanderaa in round 3 and land some clean combinations that got Vanderaa out of there. Shout out to my boy Eric Betts Fights, who actually had a bet on that and called Chase Sherman round 3 knockout. Crystal ball type prediction there for my boy Eric. So Yeah, I mean, the losses from Vanderaa have been 3 submissions, 3 decisions, and 3 knockouts. Very equal opportunity loser there. His striking defense not great. His power's not great. I'd say the best chance for Vanderaa to win this fight is to weather the early storm of Waldo Cortes-Acosta here, push him back against the cage and work the clinch game. Slow the big man down in Acosta. And I think Acosta can be bullied in the clinch. His heavyweight championship fight, he was, maybe possibly losing that fight just due to a lack of clinch control. His opponent was getting a lot of knees, elbows, punches up against the cage, and Cortes-Acosta can be taken down off of that clinch. You get single-legged and taken down. Vanderaa could employ that strategy, but we don't often see that from him, right? He's usually playing into his opponent's game plan, so to speak. His fight IQ is pretty bad, so I gotta say, even though I see a path to victory from a guy with 6 fights in the UFC worth of experience, I gotta pick Waldo Cortes-Acosta with that 7-0 record, power in his hands early and late, and I just can't back Vanderaa in this spot, so I don't want to pay that minus 225 for Cortes-Acosta. Waldo you can get for plus 150 by knockout. I see that prop is dropped. I do like that, and I do like the late finish props for Acosta to win this fight. So give me Acosta. Not much confidence on the money line. Even the overs and unders, which are set under 2.5 at minus 181. Not even sure if I like that. Vanderaa does have a way of surviving, at least to the later portions of a fight. I'm just not sure about the overs and unders in this fight. Vanderaa is a puzzling guy. I can't back him to win here. Give me Acosta by knockout. Up next at light heavyweight, we've got a battle between 2 kickboxers, Dustin Jacoby and Khalil Rountree, going at it, with Dustin Jacoby being a sizable favorite at minus 170. About plus 135 can be had for Khalil Rountree, the underdog. The age, not that much difference here, 32 for Rountree. Jacoby is 34 in his second UFC stint this time. He is the bigger man, 6'4", with a 78-inch reach, having 2 inches of reach and 3 inches of height over Rountree. And Rountree is a guy who has some pretty spectacular moments, like his most recent win in March over Carl Robertson. Destroyed him with strikes and won inside the distance, but he's got some pretty bad moments too, getting knocked out by elbows in both the fight with Johnny Walker and Ian Kuntalaba. I think that was ground and pound strikes ultimately ended the fight there. So he can never, streak more than 2 wins together throughout his career that's lasted, I think, since 2015. And, he's got some good moments like that win over Gokhan Saki, that nasty leg kick even more recently against Modestas Bukauskas that destroyed him early in the fight. So Rountree is about as equal at getting the early finish as he is getting finished himself early. So kind of kill or be killed. And if there's no killing happening, he just has a very boring fight and is live to actually lose a decision due to his lack of output and effort. So a very hot and cold type of fighter, as reflected in his record in the UFC. He's 6'5" and 1 no contest. That 1 no contest was a decision loss to Mikhail Oleksiejczuk that was overturned. So Dustin Jacoby having a much better run at it. 6 wins, 0 losses, 1 draw, which was to Ian Kuntalaba. The more likely guy to score points here. I think the better, more polished kickboxer at range in mixed martial arts. And, Dustin Jacoby's not even going to have to defend takedowns here because Khalil does not even attempt that part of his game. So just a better fighter, all said and done. Dustin Jacoby is on a streak here, and I don't see Khalil Rountree ending that one. Jacoby has only been put out 1 time by strikes, and that was, I believe that was in Bellator to King Mo Lawal. So about 8 years ago at this point. So far, Jacoby looks pretty defensively sound. So give me Jacoby to win this fight. Most likely probably by, just a safe minute-winning decision here. Khalil Rountree is live to get finished, though, as I mentioned, so maybe an early KO prop is worth taking a look at for Jacoby if those props drop and that number's high enough, but give me Jacoby by decision as the ultimate pick here. Up next at welterweight, we've got Tim Means taking on Max Griffin, 2 guys that are not very young for the division. You've got Tim Means, 32, 13, and 1 record. At 38 years old, he's got a lot of fight miles, a lot of time in the UFC cage at the high level, and, the better days are certainly behind him. Max Griffin, 36 years old, surprisingly. I mean, it shouldn't be that surprising. He just moves around pretty well for the age, but he's had a lot of fights in the UFC and has had mixed success in those. I'd say some of his better success has been recently, so he seems to be sort of getting better in some ways, coming off of something that I consider to be sort of an impressive loss against Neil Magny by a very close split decision earlier this year. He even got the better of Neil Magny early, knocked him down pretty viciously. Could have potentially ended the fight there, but Neil Magny, being a crafty veteran, recovered strong and got the better of some key positions against the cage later in the fight. So Max Griffin, the minus 175 to minus 185 favorite. Tim Means about a plus 150 or so underdog here. So Tim Means is old. His durability seems to maybe be gradually declining. He boasted some pretty good durability for a long time. He has been knocked down time and time again, but always survives. Most recently, actually a while ago, Nico Price is the only guy to really knock him out by strikes officially. D-Rod has actually submitted him and preceded that with some strikes, and so did his most recent loss to Kevin Holland, club and sub, in that fight as well. It could have been a TKO stoppage just as equally as it could have been that Darce choke that Kevin Holland locked up. So things that I like about Tim Means, though, he's very awkward with that herky-jerky style, gets in range, can counter effectively, and pretty much shock opponents with his odd timing. And then he pushes forward and closes the distance between his opponents, gets them against the cage, and he's very good in the clinch. And lately his durability has sort of aided him in that. He can usually get himself out of a bad situation by clinching up with his opponents. So Max Griffin, more well-rounded, I would say, at this point. The smoother mover, way more fluid on the feet, better timing in his strikes. He outlands his opponents on average, which you like to see, of course. Decent accuracy and good takedown defense. And again, he's got power as well. He's got more power than you'd credit him for in his record in the UFC. He's had 6 separate opponents where he's knocked them down, including that last fight with Neil Magny I mentioned. Before that, even knocking down his other veteran test in Carlos Condit, and before that, whatever steam Song Kenan had on his entry into the UFC was stolen by Max Griffin, who knocked him out viciously. So a lot of power from Max Griffin. I think he does have the potential to end this fight, and I just really do think that he's still on the more impressive run here in the UFC, has more gas in the tank, and I think Tim Means is, we're starting to see a decline from him, even though he's been facing, like Kevin Holland, coming down to 170, still a very dangerous opponent, of course. But there's just little things in the timing and the movement and the reaction time from Tim Means. His defense overall, I think, is going to fail him in this fight. And I think Max Griffin does have the potential to end this inside the distance. The money line is good enough for me. Give me Max Griffin to win this fight. Okay, we've made it to the main event at featherweight. Calvin Kattar taking on Arnold Allen. A very exciting main event here, and the money line is pretty even on these guys. They're both at a pick'em price tag, but recently money has flown in on Arnold Allen. He's the minus 120 favorite. You can have minus 105 or even money on Calvin Kattar, who will soon be the plus money underdog if this keeps going in that direction for Arnold Allen. We're seeing Calvin Kattar has actually been in the UFC a little bit less time than Arnold Allen, but he's had 2 more fights, 11 UFC fights, going 7-4 for Calvin Kattar. Arnold Allen, 9 fights in the organization, going 9-0. And he's had some pretty good wins, some good decision wins. Gilbert Melendez, Nick Lentz, Sadiq Youssef, who he hurt a couple of times in that fight, and most recently last March in London, round 1, 2.5 minutes into the round 1, he had a beatdown of Dan Hooker, shut down any offense from Dan Hooker, pretty much better than anybody besides Michael Chandler. Edson Barbosa got him out of there through a war of attrition, but Dan Hooker, that's a very good name to have, especially to finish him within 1 round. Arnold Allen, as I mentioned, a lot of decision wins, also 4 submission victories, a lot of those being front chokes from his opponents, giving up on the striking exchanges and panic wrestling, jumping in and getting their neck caught from the good takedown defense and BJJ of Arnold Allen. It's not like he's going in there and wrestling guys to the mat and then, taking their back or anything. Not that he can really do that against Calvin Kattar, who's got a very good 90% plus takedown defense rating over 11 fights. And Calvin Kattar's as durable as they come. So looking at just the simple tale of the tape, Calvin Kattar's the bigger man, 3 inches of height with 5'11", a 72-inch reach. He's got a couple inches of reach to work with here, which, not that much reach, but in a very technical striking battle that could pay dividends. Calvin Kattar is 34 years old, obviously a lot more miles on him as a UFC fighter, which Max Holloway pretty much aged him another 5 years. Calvin Kattar is the younger man by 6 years at 28 years old. 18-1 record, undefeated in the UFC for Allen, as I said. 23-6 is the record of Calvin Kattar, who's had the much better competition faced so far, both losses and wins. So this is going to be, the 5th 5-round fight for Calvin Kattar's career and the 6th main event spot He did have that one main event spot with Zabit Magomed-Sharipov a few years back. That was a 3-round fight, victory there. So this is going to be a very close fight, and it's going to come down to a few key things. I think the durability of Calvin Kattar is huge, and also his power. His one-punch power is big as well. He times his combinations very well. I think he's got the better technical boxing of the two guys here. Arnold Allen, don't get me wrong, very clean, very crisp, and young enough to improve. Arnold Allen has fast hands, but his punches and bunches are really where he stops guys. You know, has to fluster them when he smells blood and then end the fight that way. Calvin Kattar at featherweight has legitimate one-punch power. That right cross is nasty. He sets up even the left hand with a nice right uppercut. His combinations are sick. And his timing, his accuracy, and his cardio to last, very, very good. You know, that 5-round experience I mentioned is, again, going to pay dividends here. Arnold Allen has a very ferocious pace. It looks like he could keep that up for 5 rounds, but, I mean, that's a tough task, especially against a guy as durable as Calvin Kattar, who won't be backed up that easily. So Arnold Allen's going to have to find a way to land the better punches to gain the respect of Calvin Kattar and stay in his face for 5 rounds. And Calvin Kattar, you have to imagine you have to be in there for 5 rounds. He's durable as hell, as we've seen in the past. Calvin Kattar could end this fight inside the distance. He also has shown the cardio to go 5 rounds, and he can also, shut down any sort of wrestling offense and keep this on the feet. So both guys probably going to get the type of fight that they want here, but I got to favor Calvin Kattar, especially if it's going towards plus money. So I'm holding my breath, waiting for the money line to move to that plus number, and I will put down a bet on Calvin Kattar for a couple of units if it reaches plus money. So just a better experience. I think Arnold Allen is, got a potential beyond what we've seen. I think his experience is going to be improved greatly in this fight, but I just don't think he's ready for a spot like Calvin Kattar. There's a lot going for Kattar here. I won't be the most surprised in the world if Allen, gets the victory. Obviously, Calvin Kattar could have a bad night. Allen could level up, even from what we've seen, but I just don't see it happening here. So give me Calvin Kattar by a 5-round decision in this fight. I do like the overs. I think the over-under is set at 2.5 rounds. Okay, there you have it, you guys. All 10 fights broken down for UFC Vegas 63. Calvin Kattar versus Arnold Allen at featherweight. Looking very much forward to the main event. The rest of the card has some spots I'm looking forward to see how they shake out. Not so interested in betting a lot of these fights, but hopefully in the next day or two when the props drop, we'll have some more gold to dig through in those props. Find some value, make some money, and on Wednesday night, I'll be having the guest I wanted to have last week. We had a slight scheduling conflict. I'll be having Bert MMA, the young prodigy, was hugely successful at UFC 280 last weekend, so I can't wait to pick his brain and chop it up with him on Wednesday night. So I'll see you guys there. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, and I will talk to you all very soon. Cheers.